Without further ado, it's time for the main event. You're not here to listen to me tonight. You're here to listen to an absolute Kiwi champion, a man who in 1982 was trapped near the summit of Mount Cook for 2 weeks and lost both of his limbs to frostbite. But don't think he's a disabled man. He's far more able than most able-bodied people. Mark is an absolute champion. He's a Paralympic silver medalist in cycling at the Sydney 2000 Olympics. He's a senior winemaker he was a senior winemaker at Montana. He's got a number of very successful businesses, and he was the first double amputee to climb the legendary Mount Everest. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for a very special speaker, Mark Inglis.
Thanks, welcome. Good on you.
Well, good evening. It's we'll try and get the tech stuff to work right, but if it doesn't, I'll just yell. Asset growth. That's what you're all into, you know. That's what we're all into in so many different ways. But I guess I'd like to redefine asset growth tonight for you and to give it some thought around, well, it's actually called growing a life, because that's what we're doing. We're growing lives for ourselves, we're growing lives for our children. That's what asset growth is all about. And that's, I guess, what I'd like to share with you tonight is growing a life. And, well, where do we start? Well, why don't we start right there? 8,850 metres above sea level. You know, 8.8 kilometres higher than we are right here, right now. If you want to go there, it's not a place you can do with luck. It's not a place, as I saw on that video, Ron was saying, you can't do it without information. You try and go there without information is exactly the same as what you're doing if you tried to get into the property market without information. That's called gambling. It's called going to the casino. Yes, it is gambling, and yes, you will lose eventually. And so hopefully a lot of what I'd spend tonight is about information, is about learning. And I'm a bit of a slow learner, as you'll find out tonight. Well, my office. You know, it's by the time I was 18 years old, actually my office had a view like that. It's a pretty good office. Boy's own job. You know, by the time I was 18, I was a search and rescue mountaineer at Mount Cook National Park. We were some of New Zealand's first ever professional athletes. It was your sport, your job, your culture, all wrapped up into one. And then as an added bonus, we got to rescue Australians all the time. That's what they're for. Finally found a use for them. Excellent. Well, for a lot of my life, especially growing up when I was young, I tried to avoid team sports like the plague, you know. It's like, I still remember crawling out of that first rugby ruck, you know. They were big. It was like I crawled out of that, I thought, no way, need to find something safer. And the thing about team sports is that I used to spend half my time worried about I wasn't doing well enough for the team. And the other half of the time, I was pissed off at the team because they weren't doing well enough for me. And then you become a mountaineer. And you discover that it's the ultimate team. You're actually tied to the other guy. Where he goes, you go. And you hope he bid not fall. We have a saying in mountaineering. It's a dangerous sandpit we play in. And it was that for me. It was way back in 1982. Phil Dool, a new team member, and myself. You know, if you're going to jump out right up here on the summit ridge of Mount Cook, Aoraki, to pick up someone who's bent or broken, someone who's injured, you better know the person you jump out with. The only way you can do that is go climbing with them. And back in November 1982, Phil and I, a new team member, we did a climb of the East Ridge of Cook. It's a beautiful climb. Comes out just up here. It's like, in fact, when you're standing up there, you've got both your ice tools in, you're standing on the front points of your crampons, and you can see between your feet 2 kilometres straight down. excellent place to be. It's bloody great. Only problem is we stuck our nose over the top and we saw we'd made a major mistake. And one of those mistakes was we believed the weather forecast. We had a 24-hour window to do this climb. We stuck our nose over the top after 12 hours and realised that weather report was out by 12 hours. Huge westerly storm was hitting Mount Cook. Well, we couldn't go down the way we'd come. We'd be stuck out in a major storm on a huge ice face that had just taken us 12 hours to climb. All we had to do was just whip down this ridge here, a couple of abseils, home free. Well, we didn't even get 50 metres. Lying in our stomachs, our ice tools into the hard ice, and the wind was blowing so hard it would pick your feet right off the ground. For those that go out on the harbour here, you understand, mountaineers understand, is that the wind will kill you. It will kill you up there, hypothermia, just suck the heat out of your body, or else it'll just blow you straight off the mountain. Got to get out of the wind. Now, that's not a place where you can dig a nice fancy snow cave. It's hard blue ice. You take what you get. And what we got was a little ice cave just up in here. It was about the size of, about twice the size of this table. About the size of a small freezer at home, actually. About the same temperature. -20. You couldn't lie down, you couldn't sit up. But you're out of the wind, you can survive. And survive we did. I sat in that ice cave for 1,166,400 seconds. And each of them felt like an hour. We sat in that ice cave for 13 and a half days. We thought we'd be there for 12 hours, 24 hours. But every time we stuck our nose outside, the wind was still howling. We'd had the good luck to find that ice cave, but we also had the bad luck to crawl into it at the start of the longest recorded spell of bad weather in New Zealand history. Why did we survive when other people had only survived 9 days? We survived through information. We survived through knowledge. We were the people that rescued other people. If we didn't know, who would? But we also survived because of faith. And not faith necessarily in a deity, but faith in our own search and rescue team that they would never give up coming to get us. Our job was to stay alive. And we did. It was on the 29th of November, 30 years ago. We closed Middle Peak Hotel. Its room service was terrible, but the checkout worked. We rocked our way to hospital. I guess everything about life, everything about property investment, about everything you do in life is about change. And it's how we manage that change is the thing that defines us, I believe. And I believe you need to look at life as the real challenge of change. And part of that challenge of change is the concept of gold standards. I've got some great gold standards in my life. I've seen the birth of my 3 children. And I've stood on the roof of the world. Stood on the podium in Sydney. But I've got some gold standards in some very tough days. I've got some gold standards in pain that I never want to exceed. I've got some gold standards in some very black days. But I guess my true gold standard for change was 9 o'clock in the morning, on Christmas Eve actually, 1982. That's when the surgeon came in and put 2 lines on my legs that were rotting and killing me, 5.5 inches below the knee, and wheeled me into theatre. The only thing I could think as he was wheeling me in, well, actually 2 things. One is you don't have to worry about medical misadventure. They're not going to cut off the wrong leg. Number 2 is just cut those things off and let me get out of here. I thought I had it totally wired. But you know what? You wake up. You wake up the next day, which just happens to be Christmas Day. And you look down the bed and the sheets end halfway down. That's when I came to understand what my dear old departed dad had told me is true. And that you never quite know what it's like until it actually happens to you. When I woke up on that Christmas Day, I knew that the real challenge from now on, well, it wasn't to learn to run or to ski or to climb or do any of those things. Others had done that. The real challenge for me for the rest of my life was to learn how to think. I couldn't have done any of the things I've done so far, and I'm only halfway. I won't be able to do any of the things I really want to do in the future if I really didn't understand that whole concept that in every situation, you have to look at where's the opportunity. There is no shortage of people that will tell you where the adversity is. I'm sure you can always find the advantage, but I can guarantee you there's a heap of people out there that will tell you the disadvantage. You don't need to tell me I'm a double amputee. I know. You definitely don't need to tell me the things I can't do, because even I don't know those. You know, I say, look at that. What do you see? Most people, double amputee, mountaineer. Fantastic. I go, no. What you have to see there is that is a mountaineer who will never get frostbitten feet again. It's one less thing to worry about. You know, let's move on. It's like, oh. You do have to find the positive, you know, because everyone will tell you the negative. I once saw written, I'm not sure who wrote it, but they said that the only truly free thing in life, it's not going to cost you a cent, the tax man can't take a bite out of it, is a positive attitude. The most expensive thing you can ever have in your whole life is a negative one, because it will cost you opportunity. Never want to do that. Hey, I thought, you know, growing up my dream was to follow in the footsteps of the great mountaineers of the world. I thought I'd lost that for a while. But once I really understood those lessons, I knew I could get it back as long as you did the first thing. And that first thing is take the first step. And those steps are critical. But to do it, I've had to innovate. Lots of other people have tried the things that I've done, and for a lot of reasons they weren't successful. And so one of the things is it's like I'm always trying to look for an alternative, because that's what innovation is. You know, in cycling, those things. Before Wayne Alexander, who used to work with John Britton, Wayne actually made the last two of the Britain V1000s, you know. He made Munro's bike, the Indian. Wayne and I have a joint venture in creating limbs, of stretching the absolute limits of prosthetic design. One day we'll be able to pull it all together and make a great limb. And so he took on cycling. Everyone else had used these peg legs and things like that. Well, actually, if we went out for a ride together, and if we're riding up a hill, if you can't beat me, you're a sorry sack. I've got no legs. But when we go over the top of that hill and start to go down the other side, well, actually, I've got a huge advantage. Those are 3mm thick carbon Kevlar blades. I can be 10 times more aerodynamic than you ever can. The biggest problem with those legs is bird strike. No, just don't tell Doc, all right? But it's one thing to make them, but it's another thing to go out and use them. Have a look at this.
Never felt a Now you see a double amputee with no cycling experience as a track or road cyclist until taking up the sport after the mountaineering accident. You may remember he spent 13 days in a snow cave in the Southern Alps, but now look at him go. A brilliant beginning by Mark Inglis. And he comes up with the time to beat at that stage. He's underneath, he's going well. He's in the lead, he's going well. Can he come it out to the finish? Mark Inglis of New Zealand goes into the lead. 123.169. A brilliant ride. He really is.
Wow, that was New Zealand's first ever cycling medal. In fact, that's New Zealand's first ever cycling medal. It's only a silver. It's not the gold. I was 0.2 of a second too slow. My coach reckons if I didn't have a stupid grin on my face the whole way round, I would have gone 10 times faster. But as Mr. Samarach was putting this around my neck, there was only one thing that I could see, and that was the summit of Aoraki, Mount Cook. And all the training that I did for the Paralympics, while trying to be a full-time winemaker, by trying to be a full-time father, a husband, I knew if I could do all of that and achieve that, then I could do anything. I used to carry this with me everywhere. It was like my touchstone. Then I realised what cheapskates bloody Australians are. Silver-plated! Just about worn it out. Well, I knew that I could go back to mountaineering, but I also knew that I needed a set of legs. These were our first legs we tried, actually. These are the ones I used on Mount Cook. And, well, it got me up there, but it wasn't that easy, I can assure you. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to go out and do it.
You can no longer see. Girl, have a little faith in me. Have a little faith in me.
Every time you'd put the axe in, you'd just think, oh, yes, absolutely.
You know time is our friend.
You have to do something regularly in your life to set new parameters. I think I'll come out of it a zillion stronger and with far less inhibitions for doing.
You do have to step up a lot of times in life. And you do have to have a bit of faith in me. You have to have a lot of faith in yourself. One of the critical elements of what you're doing, one of the critical elements of what I do and everything I've done is self-belief. But you still need that information, you still need that learning. It's one thing just to leap out and do it, but it's another thing, how am I going to do it better? Those Terminator legs there, that's what we called them because it made me walk like Arnie, in Terminator 1, even sounded the same. Absolutely sucked for climbing. No use at all. So we had to redesign it and we came up with these. Those legs cost me $25. You don't have to spend hundreds and thousands. It's a piece of T-shaped alloy with a pole on it. And all it needed to do was allow me to stand on it, have my front points in the hard ice, and not flex. And that's what they did. But the problem with these, and the reason they were no use on Everest, well, actually they're made out of metal. And once it gets cold, metal starts to break. I learnt that. I climbed Choi Yu, the 6th highest mountain in the world, on those legs. They started to break. So what are you going to do? Well, you create these. Carbon fibre. Rigid through here so I can control them. A Britain V1000 valve spring in the heel just so I can be a Britain V1000 test pilot. And other things that I took on the next step. This step.
The climbers have spent a week preparing and are ready to roll. But for one, the challenge is unique. Mark Inglis has a handicap that would stop most people from climbing a flight of stairs. Nevertheless, he intends to be the first man to summit Everest without legs. He's losing his voice in the thin air, but his new carbon fiber legs are working well.
I'll whip them off, dry the stumps off. Huge advantage to be able to do this partway through the day. Huge advantage. And it's working pretty damn well.
Well, they do. But then, if you want to go there, they do have to work well. But that's the whole reason I wear these 3/4 pants. The whole reason I wear these is that this little piece of carbon fibre down the bottom, which, thank you very much for your tax dollar, we get for free in New Zealand. I try and only go through one set a year. I think I've actually caught up with my ACC payments already. That's only 5% of what I do. 95% of what I do is how my stump fits in that socket. If it doesn't fit right, I can't put the power through these $3,500 carbon fibre leaf springs. And your stump's not made to stand on. All it is your calf muscle wrapped around. All my weight goes on my patella tendon, right there, just under your kneecap. You can feel it. Reach down, feel your kneecap, okay? Then just under your kneecap, between that and the shin, okay, there's a tendon about the width of your finger. You feeling your knee? Aucklanders, dodgy bunch. The whole rest of the socket is all about fitting exactly right. When I say exactly, I mean to the thickness of a piece of paper. So by about this time at night, I had a bit of a rest today, took my legs off for a couple of hours, let them swell back up again because I knew I'd be up on walking on them. But even now I can feel them just shrinking on up. Actually, the most powerful tool I have in my toolbox, actually late in the day, is someone's business card. It's exactly the right thickness late in the day to slip down inside the tibial flare, packs the leg out, and you get another 3 or 4 hours. Only problem is, Kerry, you're too tight. You only gave me 1. A and Z. I need 2. Got 2 legs. And that's what I do. And so that's why I wear 3/4 pants. I'll have my legs off 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. So it's much easier to sit down, whip a leg off, than stop, drop your strides, take your legs off, get arrested. Well, that's what happens in Christchurch anyway. So, Actually, the other reason I wear it is because I travel all the time. If you've travelled a bit, you understand that it's not so easy anymore. Going through airports, going through the magnetometer. Bugger me. I first learned actually going through Los Angeles, and I was trying to be very respectful, and I was wearing longs actually. Went through Los Angeles many years ago, set off all the alarms, got put up against the wall, whack! He had really big hands. I thought, I'm not doing that again. And so I've always walked through like this. Once they see you coming, it's much easier. I always used to joke that I've missed the biggest earning opportunity of my whole life. I've been traveling the world with hollow legs and no one looked in them. Come on, Can't say that anymore. Over half my business these days in corporate culture change and in motivational speaking and business innovation is actually in India. And about 18 months I was going through Mumbai, going through the international, coming home, and get to the magnetometer, about to walk through, and the Indian security guard said, "Stop, wait!" He's got a gun. So I stopped. He brought a chair out and he said, "Sit down." He's got a gun, so I sat down. He said, "Take your legs off." I said, "What?" He said, "Take your legs off." He's got a gun, so I took my legs off. He put them on the x-ray machine, sent them through the x-ray. I thought, excellent, sweet, In LA, I have to stand in this little glass booth for an hour while you get x-rayed up and down, you get swabbed, you get swiped, you get everything. They won't let you take your legs off there. And so I jumped off the seat and went on my knees to go through the magnetometer, and he said, "Stop, where are you going?" I said, "I'm following my legs." Rule number 1 is you never lose sight of your legs. Wow. It happens all the time now in India, whether it's Hyderabad or Bangalore or Delhi or Kolkata or Chennai or Chennai or wherever. You're going up towards the security station and they'll either go, "Bring a chair out, please sit down," or they'll go, Mr. Mark, please come around this way. It's much easier. So much for security. Wow. Everest. It is a numbers game. You know, that's the business you're in. You have to understand numbers. As a mountaineer, you do as well. People don't understand truly the numbers on Everest. You'll see a bit of the clips that they have on the news. Don't believe everything you see. About 600 people a year turn up on both sides of Everest to climb it. Of those 600, somewhere around between 10 and 20% of the people will make it to the summit. 1 in 14 of those will never make it home. You need to understand the numbers. You need to make sure you're on the right side of the ledger. And that comes from knowledge. Kiwis, we do fantastic on Everest because it feels like home. You stand there. Now, I did Everest from the north, from Tibet, not the way Sir Ed did it from Nepal, okay? I did it from Tibet for a whole bunch of reasons, but the reality is that from the north side, it's steeper, windier, colder, but there's not the risk. We've heard about gambling tonight several times. There is no gamble on the north side because you don't have to go through the icefall. That for me would be too much of a gamble. I went from the north side. Well, doesn't matter which side, but you stand there at base camp and you look up. That's exactly the same height difference as standing on the front lawn of the Hermitage at Mount Cook, looking at the summit of Aoraki. It's only 3,500 metres above you, 5 days climbing. Only difference, front lawn of the Hermitage is 765 metres above sea level. How many people have been to base camp? There's got to be someone here. It's a long way up, 5,000 metres. Half the amount of oxygen is right here, right now. And that turns Everest into a 60-day climb. And it all comes down to a simple thing called acclimatisation. Everest is such a big climb because, well, actually, if you think of a graph, you're into graphs, percentage red blood cells and health. Cyclists traditionally have doped with EPO and lots of other things to raise their red blood cell count to make better use of oxygen. Well, that's what you get when you go high, but it happens naturally, but it takes a long time. And what happens with your red blood cell count, it goes up steadily and it plateaus at just over 0.6, 60%. Gets much higher, your heart stops. Not a good idea. Your blood's too thick. But at the same time, your health's going downhill like that. Your best chance of climbing Everest is in here somewhere. Over day 40, before day 60. Day 60 is a bad day, actually. When your health gets to 0, that's a really bad thing, okay? And so you have to match that with the between 5 to 20 days a year, the jet stream lifts up and allows a human being to survive. And that's what we saw this year. Remember those images that we saw of 200 people lined up, because there are all these hundreds of people at the bottom. And the first 2 days, one of the very few days of clear time, everyone tried to go for the summit. It doesn't always work. In our case, it worked well. We spent about 3 weeks at base camp, and the whole time there, people tell you to visualize success. We've just seen the Olympics. You know, every one of those athletes have been through visualization programs, you know, visualizing success. Well, actually, that's only half of what you need to do. The other half of what we need to do is visualize the challenges. What's going to happen when you actually can't put your rent up any higher? What's going to happen when the property market drops back a bit, gets a bit softer? Have you thought about all those things? Have you thought about your plan to get around them? That's what you have to do on Everest. You have to work out all of the possible bad situations that are going to happen to you, and then work out a way to fix it. The last thing you want to be on the summit ridge of Everest and have a surprise. The last thing you want to be is put in a situation that you haven't trained for, that you don't have the information for, you don't have the knowledge, that you can't get around. When that sort of thing happens on Everest, you don't just lose money, you actually lose your life. You don't just lose your race, you lose your life. Well, if you can do all of that, I call it responsible optimism. So often we hear of people standing up and giving a great advice, always look on the bright side of life, fantastic. Just don't do it through rose-tinted glasses. Do it with that whole understanding of everything around you. They talk about people that see the glass half full, the optimist. Fantastic, excellent. People see the glass half empty, bit of a downer. Well, actually, I'm the sort of guy that sneaks on in, sees the glass, reaches in, sculls it. Why leave a glass sitting there half empty? Come on, drink it and move on. It's about going out and finding the opportunities. That's responsible optimism. And you need it up there. That's the last day on Everest. Camp 4, you see just that bit of orange tent down there. You go up what they call the exit cracks up here. That's the summit ridge all the way up there. That's the second step, real climbing crux of the north side. It's a tough day. From 8,600 or 8,400 metres up to the summit, 8850, and back down. Got to get to the top in less than 8 hours, otherwise, well, you're just not going to make it. On our day, it was a bit tough. It was clear air mostly, but it was minus 50 degrees Celsius. Now, I know you had some snow last year in Auckland. Graupel. It was Graupel. It wasn't snow, but whatever. Minus 50 is pretty cold. Minus 50, you can't wear enough clothes when you're climbing to stay warm. Minus 50, you have to keep moving. We set off at about 11 at night. And one of the things you need to understand about the north side of Everest, very, very different to the south side, okay? The south side, the way that Sir Ed and the traditional way that most people go, if you get in trouble, you can be rescued. It's all big, long snow slopes. People can be slid down those slopes. You can retrieve bodies, you can rescue people. North side, you can't. No one has ever been rescued above a line of about here on the north side of Everest unless they could walk. Even my good friend Lincoln Hall, he climbed Everest a week after me. Lincoln would be dead now, but he came out of his coma that he'd went into way up high here. But he could still walk, which is the reason he survived Everest. But he also unfortunately perished due to cancer last year. Up there's tough. And on the north side, what you'll see is you'll see bodies. Mallory, 1924. His body is lying there, right in the middle of the north face. We found him in 1999, perfectly preserved. When you die on the north side, snap frozen. You're there for time in memoriam. You go past Green Boots in a cave here. An Indian climber died on that terrible day that took Andy and Rob, two good friends, 12th of May, 1996. Go past Marco up here. He died in 2005. You walk about a metre away from him. He's still lying there, perfectly preserved with his eyes open. As you go past, you try and chip a piece of rock off and put it on him. But it's so difficult. It's so hard. You're on such an edge of your life up there that that's all you can do. It'll be years before he's covered. It's a tough place. Well, in fact, you'll remember all the media storm when I got back from Everest about the dead guy on Everest. Okay, he was a 30-year-old climber. His name, we now know, is David Sharp. He climbed Everest the day before we did. It's his third attempt. He'd lost fingers and toes previously, wanted to do it without oxygen. 12:30 at night, we're going past Green Boots Cave there, and he was in there. But he was also at the end of his life. Minus 50 degrees Celsius. He was so hypothermic he'd taken his down suit off. He was frozen completely solid. He had lost his ears and his nose completely due to frostbite. There wasn't a thing we could do. Our strongest Sherpas couldn't pick him up and carry him. You couldn't stay with him because it was too cold. You'd die too. The thing you didn't hear, with all that controversy, is who stayed with him until he passed away at 11 o'clock that morning. It was members of our team. I was with him at 10:30 in the morning, and there was still nothing you could do. His body's still there. That's how brutal Everest is. I always say, if you can stand here, if you can stand on the top of the second step, if you can climb the 3-metre overhang, the vertical 20-metre wall, if you can stand there on the top of the second step and answer 2 questions, Everest is yours. And the first of those questions is, are you tough enough to take the next step? Because you can't imagine how tough the steps are. The second question is, should you take those steps? And that is why you have a team on Everest. That is why you surround yourself with people like yourself that you can look each other in the eye and go, mate, am I doing all right? Am I going fast enough? They're the people that say, yes, carry on, carry on. Or they'll go, no, mate, you're going too slow, turn around. We had 11 members of our expedition. 7 of them made it to the summit. We turned 2 of our members around on this slope up here, 100 metres from the summit. They would never have made it. That last 100 metres from here, up outside the auditorium, back out onto Howe Street, would have taken them 4 hours. Imagine walking up these stairs here and taking an hour to do it. They're alive today because they had a team around them that screamed at them and yelled at them to turn them around. Poor David didn't have that. I was privileged to stand on that second step and actually answer yes to both of those questions and then take some more steps. These are them.
90 minutes ahead, Mark Inglis conquers the last difficult traverse before the summit.
Yeah, Woody.
So this is the last 50 metres on the roof of the world. You take about 5 steps and you stop and you try and suck some oxygen and you take another 5 steps.
After climbing on prosthetic legs for 47 days, Mark Inglis has made the summit of Everest. He's now the first man without legs to reach the top of the world.
And the first thing that people ask is, what's the view like? I don't know, I was too stuffed. You know, it was just like, you just, all of us, the first question you need to ask is, how do you know you're on the top? There are no more steps to take anywhere. And you look down and you see the other 8,000 metre peaks lower than you. You look out and you see that curve of the earth, you know, like you see out of a plane going across the Tasman or the Pacific. And you get this real feeling of relief. It's like a big wave that hits you. And then straight after, it's a bigger wave. And it's a wave of fear because you're actually only halfway. Nearly everyone that dies on Mount Everest dies on the way down. If you don't have enough energy left, when you stand on that top, you will not make it down alive. Even a lawyer couldn't argue his way out of it. It's just not going to happen. I spent 12 minutes on the top and I got out of there. It was a tough day. Standing there was minus 38 degrees Celsius. It was a tough, long trip down. It took me 10 days from the summit of Everest back to New Zealand, and that was the toughest 10 days I've ever done in my life. 2 days down off Everest, and then the rest of the way home. It was far tougher than ever climbing Everest. It was far tougher than sitting in a little ice cave on the summit of Mount Cook. But in everything that we do, there's a consequence. When you buy a property, there's a consequence. Hopefully a great one, but sometimes not so great. And when you're pushing at the limit, when you're trying to do something new, well, actually, sometimes it doesn't work out. Most people climb Everest with an oxygen mask like that. I can't, because they're like a big elephant's trunk. Come out the front there. You can't see your feet. I have to see my feet. And so I used the very first of this new type of mask. Everyone uses these now, but guess old Muggins here was the first. And what I found was that they didn't make the plastic to stand up to -50. About 1:30 in the morning it broke. And so for the rest of my summit day I had virtually no oxygen. Saves on oxygen bottles, they're $400 each. You know, saved at least 3 of those. Like, I had to make a decision, go back down or go back up. Well, I decided to carry on up. I have a real advantage over you at altitude in that I don't have so much muscle, but I have nearly my whole blood volume, so I can service what muscle I have left. And so the higher we go, the faster I go, the slower you go. I did the second fastest ascent of Everest that day out of 12 people that summited. But oxygen helps with a bit of heat as well. I didn't have that heat. My fingers at base camp, my fingers back at home in New Zealand. You know, my fingers now, that's what Everest cost me. What it cost me was not being embarrassed, sitting at the lights, picking my nose with my little finger. Never have to worry about that one again. You know, and these two here, these puppies, a bit like nibbling your fingernails back a bit far, you know. But ladies, 50% discount, I've had my nails done, you know. It's got to be a good thing, doesn't it? Actually, there's only one thing I really, really worry about, and it's really quite disappointing. Geez, we've got some terrible drivers in New Zealand. How are you supposed to participate in road rage with that? I mean, that's the least offensive thing you've ever seen in your life. You know, it's like, oh. Well, actually, I broke my leg on Everest as well, but that's one of the advantages of being a double amputee. Only takes me 6 hours to fix a leg. How long does it take you? 6 weeks or 6 months? And so there's always an advantage. One of the things that we've seen, one of the things that New Zealanders do well in the property market, in IT, in farming, in absolutely everything, in wine, where I have a lot of experience, is that we're true innovators. And to be a true innovator, it's like, just never accept the status quo. Just because everyone else says that's what we should be doing, question it. Ask why. Find out why. Always ask the question. That's the most critical element to change, you know. But if you do it, the real challenge that you have, if you're a true innovator, is overcoming what I call the gravity of change. All those other people around you that say you can't do it. That was one of the hardest things on climbing Everest, were all the people that said, oh no, you can't do it. Well, what do they know? It's having that confidence to do it. There's a true innovator. I do spend a lot of time in India, and I was privileged to spend some time with Ratan Tata. It's almost inconceivable the size of the empire their family have built. And they've built it through innovation. They've built it through commitment, focus, and passion. It's amazing to see those things. But what we're doing, what you're doing, is investing in your future. And that's what I do. Except in sort of different ways, really. It's asset growth. Well, the assets that I work with are like young guys like that. And that's why I took on the role as the adventure ambassador for Scouts, along with Bear Grylls and I. That's why we both do it. Because the only way we know we can grow this youth, that we can create the people that will create a new Google, a new Microsoft, a new TradeMe, is to make sure we've got youth out there that are always being challenged, that will step up and take a risk. That's what we need to do. People like young Andy here, 12 years old, had 8 operations. He was told that by the time he was 21, he was going to have his leg off. Vascular disease. Well, he went to his surgeon and said, Well, actually, Mark Inglis walks better than me. Why do I have to wait until I'm 21? Why can't I have a head start? At 14 years old, he had an amputation through the knee. He was in his school cycling team, the school rowing team. He's graduating as a civil engineer out of Otago University. A lot of people go, who inspires you? And they expect me to say people like Sir Red or Reinhold Messner or the great climbers, the great explorers. Yes, they do, but the people that really inspire me are the people like young Andy, who's got more courage than I've ever had. They're the people that will redefine what we might see as disability. In Mumbai, I've worked with this group, Vision Rescue. And the thing I love with them is that byline right there, because we can. Everyone looks at India, 700 million below the poverty line. What are we going to do? Well, one guy just went out, he brought 4 old school buses, and he goes on a route through one of the major slums just on the edge of Mumbai and educates the kids. 4 different places each day. Every day it goes around. They get a meal of dal bhat. They get 1 hour's tuition. These are kids that will never get to school. And he's making a difference. And that's the thing that I love to see. I've been privileged to sit around tables with presidents, with prime ministers, with the Google guys, Jimmy Wales from Wikipedia. They all want to know the one thing. How do we get our youth out there to go and take a challenge? Because that's the critical element for growth that we all need. They call it real responsibility. Some people call it corporate social responsibility. I just call it an opportunity to do something. I also call it innovative thinking. Have a look at this.
Before leaving base camp, Mark has some unfinished business.
Very nice to see you. See you again.
On a previous training climb in the Himalayas, Mark met Tile.
Tile and I are about the same age. We lost our legs in the same way. We both lost them through frostbite 20 odd years ago. But the difference is that he's been walking around on his knees for 20 years. Yeah.
As his old friend smiles in disbelief, Mark fits him up with a second chance.
This is one strong man. If anyone can do it, yeah, I think it's Tile here can do it. Need to remember, he hasn't stood for 20 years. His muscles were all atrophied. I couldn't take a plaster cast of his stump. I just had basic measurements to make the socket out of. This is 2 hours after he first tried them on.
He's coming around pretty quick, huh?
Yeah, he's going very well. Stand up straight. Yeah, that's it.
That's great.
Whoa!
And look at the smile on his face. It's worth $1 million.
Only to a dentist.
This is the best high-altitude physical therapy I've ever seen. It's fantastic.
He's got worse teeth than me, and I'm a winemaker.
Oh, he's happy.
Oh, very happy. It's good to see someone upright.
He hasn't walked for 20 years. This must be like, a miracle for him.
Oh, it's been probably one of the best days of my life, really. I've always professed that one of the most important things you can do in life is to do some good for someone else. And today it's sort of tangible, really. So it's pretty neat, yeah. It was more than pretty neat. See Tile stand up. It was far more important than ever standing on Everest. I know what it's like not to have legs. Well, in fact, more importantly, I know what it's like to have legs. Tile, he was disabled. We don't have disability in New Zealand. Disability is a lack of access to resources. We have access to resources in New Zealand. If there's any disability, then it's the way that you think about it. What we have, what I have, is opportunity. It's opportunity to live your life in a different way. It is not easier. Yes, it is a damn sight harder. but it's still an opportunity in our culture and in our environment. And that was my promise to Tile. It was from that Anne and I created Limbs for All. It's a New Zealand charity. We have our own Act of Parliament. We're the sustainable charity. Love that word. Because if you give me $1, I promise never to spend it. We're a capital fund. We just use the interest. Okay? And so the fund just keeps on growing and we can keep on doing more. Every project we take on, we guarantee we can do for as long as it needs to happen. So we don't do small projects, but we're making a wee bit of a difference.
Now, what would Osh say about that?
There's a reason why Nepal has the highest rate of broken backs of any country in the world. That's one of the reasons. The main reason, actually, is young women like this young lady here falling out of trees because they don't have enough grass for their yaks. We have about 2 teams of New Zealand agronomists over there trying to help at the moment. But people are still falling out of trees. 70% of the broken backs are young women. From what we know, about 13% of them make it to hospital alive. And when they get there, somebody gives them a wheelchair like that. That's not right. And so it's like, that's a death sentence to someone in a wheelchair. Pressure sores, you can't get in and out of it. And so we've committed to ensuring that everyone in Nepal that needs one has one of these. It's a rough terrain chair. I've actually got one in the garage. I just built it up at home, brought it back. Gel seat, that big long, you can go downstairs in that thing. I've tried to go downstairs in other wheelchairs, and the first thing, straight over the handlebars. Booze was involved. Do not drink and drive, all right? It's incredible. Actually, if you want to come along, you can see it. I try and take at least one trip back to Nepal every year. We climb what we think called Gyotko Ri, about 5,500 metres. Look out on Everest there, Lutsi, Makalu. Magic place, The views that you get. It's a place to really refresh your brain. It's like a life crystallising place. And you don't have to carry your bag. We have someone to do that, Anyone, we've taken 13-year-olds through to Papa Smurf there, 69 years old. Did fantastically well. Actually, a bit of a career advice. Don't be a courier in Kathmandu. They ring up, I've only got one parcel. It's like, some of the porters, we belong to the Responsible Porters Alliance, so we limit our porters to 40 kilograms per person. 40 kgs! I'm struggling to lift it. These guys are carrying over 100 kgs, 5 to 6 days in a row. We're trying to eliminate that, but it'll take a long time. This young lady here, she was about late teens, early 20s underneath that load. She couldn't put that on her back herself. Took 2 guys to do it, and she still went uphill faster than all my clients. And you moan and bitch about traffic in Auckland, well, up there they have traffic jams as well. And if you want to build a house, well, you carry it yourself. Okay? So next time you think that you can't get the HIAB in to build the house, there's a way around it, I can assure you. Hey, just to finish. There's been a lot of people in this room, I'm sure in the property market, that felt like the rabbit. I've felt like that rabbit many times in my life as well. When something you can hear coming around the U-bend of life isn't going to be pleasant. But the one thing I've learned is that, well, you can look at it that way, or else you can just be a good Canterbury rabbit and kick ass. That's it's all about alternative thinking. That's what it's about. Don't accept the status quo. There is always another way. Put a bit of innovation, passion and commitment. He will always get the cheese, no matter what. T.S. Eliot said it better than I ever could. It's only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far they can go. We have to do it with knowledge, as you heard Ron talking about, but you also have to have the confidence to step out and do it. Hey, I stood right there, 7 o'clock in the morning on May the 15th, 2006, watched the sun come up. And the only thing I could think of was, I can do so much more. I'll never be the equal of an able-bodied mountaineer. I don't have legs. But I can be the equal of any mountain I choose to climb. My challenge to each and every one of you is make sure you're even more than your next mountain. Good luck. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark Inglis. Just wondering, Mark, if you had a couple of minutes available, if you had any questions from the audience.
No worries. I've been a winemaker for 18 years. I can take criticism. I just know it's wrong.
Absolutely.
13 days is about knowledge, really. You know, the longest anyone had ever survived in New Zealand was 9 days. First 7 days, no food. Great little diet, actually. It's minus 20, you burn about 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day lying dead still. Have half a Shrewsbury biscuit per day for 5 days. Fat comes off your ass like you can't believe. You know, I can't see why, you know, Jenny Craig hasn't got it, you know, on TV. I went in there at 70 kgs and I came out at 39. We survived because we got a food drop on the 7th day. No one could get to us, but they would drop us a bag that had food. And we survived, well, because we were rescued on the day we were rescued, the 29th of November. For the next 19 days after that, the weather was bad. So we survived with a bit of luck as well. But the number one thing is just never giving up. Never making the decision to stop. That's the thing. And that's the thing I took to a thing like the keynote on the track in Sydney. It's the hardest race you can ever do. You just have to go absolute balls out. If you don't finish the finish line and either faint or vomit, you haven't ridden hard enough. And so that was good training for that. It's just never give up. Yeah.
Any other questions? Please put your hands up. Anything, any topic? Yes, over there. I might just get to Andrew Bruce will bring the microphone over just so the rest of the audience can hear on this side of the room.
It's not working. I'm just curious about how you became a winemaker.
Oh, that was easy, really. I didn't have a degree or anything when I was mountaineering, so I went back to school because I figured that back in 1983, when I first got my set of legs, that there wasn't much of a career path for double amputee mountaineers. I could make one now, though. And I didn't have a degree or anything, so I went back to school, came out with a first-class honours degree in human biochemistry. I'm actually a genetic engineer by trade. And I was working at the School of Medicine in Christchurch. We used to play this joke on a trick on our director of our research team, because Derek was always, he used to get upset when people left to go and people poached his staff and things. So he'd leave a copy of the Christchurch Press, Wednesday edition, open on his desk, situations vacant page, and you just cut one out. Screw it up and throw it away, you know? So poor old Derek would have to go down 7 floors, across to the boat sheds, buy another paper, come back up, open it up to see that one of his staff had just applied for a massage parlour job. And I did that one day, opened it up, and there was a job there, trainee winemaker, Montana Wines. You needed a great science degree, you needed life experience, and a passion for wine. And I thought, that's me. And it was the start of a fantastic 10 years in the New Zealand wine industry. Starting off as a trainee winemaker, then I became the cellar master in Marlborough, and I was part of the small team that went through the culture change process to take Montana from being an almost bankrupt company in 1992 to being selling for almost $1 billion in 2002. And so it was a very exciting time, you know, and it's since that time I still dabble in wine, but mostly to try and keep the cellar full at home. So yeah.
Great. Any more questions for Mark Inglis?
One right there.
Yes, in the front row, and then we'll come back there. Andrew, please come down to row 4, four people in the centre block. Great, thank you.
You were saying that after you got to the top of Everest, it was very hard coming back down. I don't think you said why that was.
Oh, for a double amputee to go up's easy, but to go down is 3 times harder, sometimes 10 times harder than going up. It's just the biomechanics of the way the legs work. And so I knew my biggest challenge was to come down. It normally takes me almost twice as long, at least, to get down a mountain than an able-bodied person. The other thing was that on summit day, the last 2 days on Everest, your body preferentially burns protein rather than fat and carbohydrate. So you lose a lot of muscle tone, and my stump shrunk like that. And the one day in my whole life I could never take my legs off was summit day. You know, no business cards in my pocket to poke them in, minus 50 degrees, you know. And on summit ridge of Everest, imagine you took your leg off and you dropped it, you know. Da-doing, da-doing, da-doing. Right? Bugger. And what happened was that my stump shrunk so far, I went too far in and I put the bones through the ends of my stumps. So it wasn't very comfortable coming home. That's why it was a very long trip home. The particular airline I was flying with wouldn't allow me to board the plane in Bangkok unless I had walked on the plane. And that wasn't very comfortable, I can tell you. There was a lot of whiskey drunk on the way home, I can assure you. That was the reason why it was such a long, tough trip home. I'm a learner, just a slow one. Yeah.
Great. I think we had a question about 4 rows back.
Could you tell us how you came to start Peak Fuel?
Peak Fuel was the energy supplement that we started, and it really came from, I'm a winemaker. I like good food, I love things that taste right, and I'm out training for the Paralympics, and you've got to eat elephant snot, you know, because that's what all the other sports foods taste like. And so at night in the lab at Montana, in Marlborough, I used to make my own. You know, I did the research, I've got a first-class honours degree in human biochemistry, I understand nutrition, I did all the research, I created what I thought was the ideal, and I created it. My family, my son's a pro elite mountain bike racer and other people, and we used it. And it was just that thing, well, actually, I need to share it. And that's where we started Peak Fuel, which you'll now see mostly through the Avanti stores, the Avanti Plus stores around New Zealand. And that was a great learning experience. I don't own the part of the company anymore, but it was a huge learning curve to set it up. And I treated it really like taking a new wine into a new market. Yep. But I'll tell you what, a lot of the time, it was a very tough thing to do. But a lot of things that we do in life are tough, and that's why, you know, I don't cart this thing around anymore. I cart this around now. So what I call my touchstone, and it's a wee bit of the summit of Everest. Not from the very top, all right? I haven't made it any shorter, you know? That would be a bad thing because I've got the height tattooed on my arm. And that for me is my touchstone. And when things get tough, when you're out on the road, when you're trying to work out what you're doing, it's a thing that you grab hold and you remember the friends that have gone by. I've lost a lot of friends in the mountains. You remember how hard it is to train, how hard it is to climb, but you also remember the huge feeling of achievement of actually making it. And that's one of the great things of taking on any challenge, is that feeling of achievement. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Mark Inglis. An absolutely excellent presentation. I'm sure you'll all very, very much agree. Mark's done some absolutely amazing things, so we wish you every success in the future, and congratulations on all the successes you've had today. Really, really appreciate you coming up to Auckland, and wish you all the very best of that too. Loved hearing about what Mark's been doing, Mark's charities as well, his abundance mentality. Absolutely fantastic there, and I think a lot of lessons that we as property investors can all take on board. We need to make sure that we've got the right mindset, the right approach to things. Thank you all very much for your time. Hope you've enjoyed today's meeting. Talk to you soon. See you next month. Yeah.